9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! Happy New Year!
Hello! Yes, Happy New Year's. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre, and I'm pro-marriage, pro the nuclear family on this platform and in this dialogue. So I'm actually going to segment this, God's willing I could put chapters, but this is going to be a welcome and just talking about marriage and family, just different observations. I just wanted to put this disclaimer. I have lash extensions, so I hope it's not a distraction. I'm trying them out. I wanted to try out falsies as extensions for my lashes because I see a lot of people do it. I thought it was super pretty, and I've always loved long lashes, so it's like, oh, so maybe I'll get better with it in time, God's willing. But yeah, hopefully it works. This video will be sectioned in 4 chapters, and within each section its own theme. There are also videos I'll showcase within the videos of relevant content that I've made that you should check out. So ideally, this dialogue will be empowering. Last year, January 2023, I made a welcome video to my channel, and I decided, you know what, maybe I should make that a more common element. So this year, January 2024, I want to welcome you to my platform with the first video of the year on my platform. Chapter 1, Ministry. In this chapter, I'm going to speak about why we need to make ministries for the singles population in our demographic, because in my belief, they are a neglected demographic. Take a look at this skit. There's music playing in the background of this, so I'm going to mute that segment, but you can find the video on Instagram. The video features a woman seeking advice for her marital difficulties and being told the cliches of, just wait on the Lord. You just really need to trust in God. Cliches that, as the skit is entitled, if married couples were spoken to the way singles were, would seem pretty bizarre, right? Okay, so what do you think about that skit? My thoughts are that singles were often talked down to. Every time we want to get married, cliches are thrown at us. Oh, enjoy your single season. You don't need to think about marriage. It's not a good thing, and you wouldn't want marriage, and blah blah blah. And that doesn't answer our questions. So, I'm thankful that this woman made this skit because it's something that I've noticed and thought about. But what if marriage was as easy as this? I'm going to show you this snippet.
You have broken heart.
Yes.
You have broken heart. Do you know him?
No, please.
Do you know her? No. You guys should start talking. Hold their hands. Go. Take her number. Take his number. Start talking. You guys will marry. Go.
What if pastors, instead of being like the example this woman showcased, what if they were like that guy? He's providing a common sense avenue. You're single, at least try to figure it out. And, we could debate whether that makes any sense, but what if that could be the way that we help singles? Here is the ABC progressive logic of it, rather than, oh, well, you'll be okay. Just you got to keep loving on your singleness right now. You just got to keep being single and proud. Yeah. So I like the fact that he provided a resource. I think we're going somewhere with this. I think that would be a good thing. Instead of making us feel bad because we desire marriage, believers, we can provide resources that can help the singles community to either channel our minds away from marriage so we could focus on other things since it's so bad and we shouldn't want it. I hope you could tell I'm being facetious here. Or help these people find partners, because after a certain point it's not reasonable. And please do not, for the love of God, keep bringing up Paul. Number one, because God is no respecter of persons. If he can love me single, he can love me as I'm married. He can love us who are single just as much as people who are married. Number two, Paul did not say God told him to say that. He said that is his preference, and as a preference, he wants people to be like him. But even he put the disclaimer, which honestly didn't even need to be made, but he put the disclaimer and said, if you're going to have those desires, it's better to marry than to burn. The reason I say that disclaimer didn't have to be made, because God does not have any such wording. He does not mention it's better to be married than to burn. He just tells you it's not good to be alone. He just tells you marriage gives you favor. So at the end of the day, God's word or Paul? Which one? Yeah, Paul is an apostle, but God is the creator. Just saying. And yes, God can allow different people to speak, but I trust his word as the ultimate, even within the word. Because what does God say within his word about the word? Not saying that Paul doesn't have the most amazing, by the way, scriptures. I love his scriptures. But some people, they just read it so on one extreme or the other and without nuance. The way he made it. The next thing is, we can't keep telling singles like, hey, enjoy your single season, because how long is this season even going to last? Like, especially if we're in our 20s and 30s, at some point it's like, listen, we've been single since birth. I think it's time to change seasons. We can't just keep the old wineskin. Let's have something fresh. There's a lot of things I could say about that, but it's definitely a lot more detailed than just saying, please, just enjoy your single life. You don't need marriage. Marriage is for the birds. It's not for good people, which is sad, because the same people that are often telling us, don't get married, I got married. That's why you shouldn't do it. Don't be like me. Those same people, I don't want them to tell their spouse that, because I wouldn't want my spouse to talk like that. Like if somebody said, hey, how are you enjoying your marriage? And my spouse is like, oh, don't do it. I think I'd probably feel a bit alarmed. Honey, did you just tell someone don't get married? And their excuse is, yeah, I did. Because the Lord. Yeah, let's see how that works out. So instead of extremist ideas, let's provide resources for singles. I did research this app, and it's called the Holy app, and I've been watching their channel, and they have different testimonies of couples getting together. So I think that's a pretty great thing. That's a resource that's being created to help people of a specific belief system to find marriage. What are other resources that God's willing we can create? Because the Bible does say for those of you who want to be religious, and I'll tell you why I have to explain religion in that sense. The Bible says pure religion, undefiled, and acceptable before God. So in other words, there are ways we could use religion, but if you want the one that's pure, you want the one that's undefiled and unacceptable before God, then you have to appease this, to tend to those in need, the widows and the orphans. Widows are those who are not married. And because they're not married, they're in a very vulnerable predicament economically because they have children and they are not married. And in those societies, for the widows as women and the discrimination women unfortunately dealt with, that compounds to their limitations of access. So tending to those in need is a religion. It's I would argue, a duty. Well, what about women who are likened unto widows? How do we tend to their needs? Because God did say there would be women that would be likened unto widows. What about the children that are likened unto orphans? Because if their mother cannot be there 100% of the time and their father isn't there, that's like an orphaned child. How do we tend to their needs? And when I looked at what God did in Scripture, He would have, in the instance of a woman whose husband died, in the Old Testament, the practice of her marrying the brother of the man who died, just so that she wouldn't have to raise those children in a compromised circumstance. So God provided the resource through that custom and allowing these women to have access to marriage. So if anybody, if you don't care of us singles, if you don't want to care about us, care about the singles who do have children, provide them a spouse because they need it. What are the services that we can do for them? Because raising a child without support systems is extremely economically hard. It's emotionally difficult. It's mentally draining. So how do we tend to them? So regardless of the approach, we do need to provide resources and services and ways in which singles could get married. As when people are of marrying age, when people are ready to be married, what ways can we create to help them? Because it's not just, oh, just walk outside the house, somebody will find you. Just go walk outside, someone's there. How predictable is that, or even reasonable, to just go to the mall and then you just find your spouse? Like, people like to demonize apps and online spaces, but what if I'm just there to shop? I'm not there to, hey, if God wants to provide, fine, but people are not looking for their spouse at the mall or just getting their clothes. And even if they were, how would we know this? Just by looking at people. You see how I'm wearing these rings? Just by looking at it, you would think I'm married. I'm not. I've never been married, and I never even dated in my entire life. So how could we just tell just by the image, like, oh, this person's available? Well, I could tell because I could see in 3D, I could see the letters single above them. Great. Let's use technology as a resource. Let's use what God has allowed people to create through apps and through science as a resource. There should be no connotation about online relationships because these people are putting themselves out there. They want to be seen. They want to be chosen. They want to be selected. It's hard for them to put themselves out there. And people are making it seem like people who are online and looking for partnerships, they're desperate. Well, what's wrong with being desperate for something good? If marriage is a good thing, I want to be desperate for it. That's like telling me if I wanted water and I was so desperate for water, oh, you're desperate. And do whatever it takes to get to this next stage.
Why is there such a stigma against using technology as a resource for singles?
Do whatever it takes to get to that next stage. Do whatever it takes to fulfill the will of God. Do whatever it takes. Be fruitful and multiply. I guess you could say it's the first commandment. Do whatever it takes to get, well, within godly reason. So if an app is part of that godly reason, I don't know why that's connoted as a bad thing. Why would we connote? And so, yeah, we could get mad at these people that talk down to us and say, hey, you'll be fine. Singleness is a great thing. I was single once upon a time. I haven't been single in about 30 years. Like, just like those people are off, it's also kind of strange that singles make it more difficult than we should. There's singles who say, oh, I don't want to do online dating. It's so cringy, or this, and this. And it's like, have you tried every single app? Because they're not all made by the same companies, and they don't have the same filters and ways to get on them, and there's different, depending on price points, different kinds of people depending on the type. So how is that a bad thing? I mean, I shop online. I've never been to that online store, but I shop online. So why wouldn't I research online? I don't have to just go to the, yes, it's important, but you don't have to just drive to a library and get a book off the shelf and see what's out there. The internet can make sources easier for us to find. So you would think the internet could also make it easy for us to find men and women. People could say, well, what about the stigma of online dating? To who? People who don't know how to use technology? Because in the technological age, there should be no stigma to something that has technology. And the same people who could say, oh, it's better to meet people face to face. Well, how am I going to meet people face to face? Like, just go up to some random person and say, hey, I was watching you from afar. I can't tell if you're married or not, but I'm just going to see if you're available for me. So the online aspect as a resource, we upload ourselves to that database. We put ourselves on and we give you the pictures and we show you our life and we tell you, hey, I'm available. It's like we're telling you we're available. We want to be chosen for marriage. And how is it cringy if you're looking for the same thing? Who are you? You think you're perfect or something? You're on this app, I'm on this app. We're all trying to figure it out. So let's stop demonizing online dating as if God can't use that. And Chapter 2, Conspiracy Theory. In this section, I'm going to share what I believe are conspiracies against our demographic. I think these are less conspiracy theories and more conspiracies that attack our unity, our ability to perpetuate families, and our minds.
Conspiracy against the Black family and the Black collective.
Because the Bible says iron sharpens iron, so we need a little bit of force. We need a little bit of the pressure it takes to sharpen each other. So we need the politics that's going to sharpen us. For me, that politics is being aware of the world we live in as a collective, and how this world tends to be anti-us. To have a perspective that is pro-us is helping to affirm us in the midst of the friction, which actually makes us stronger. And speaking of friction, I have a conspiracy theory, and it's not so innocuous, even though we could take our politics and sharpen each other with it. I think the forces, as in the powers that be, those that the Bible describes as rulers of this wicked age, wickedness, and in high places, I think those types of beings, and yes, of course, the principalities, I think they are against us. I do. I think they're against our demographic. And what do I mean by that? I think that when I look at the historical ways that they attacked us, kept us low, kept us from buying land, kept us from keeping land if we did have land, kept us from education, kept us from accessing wealth, dispersed our movements. For example, that's a very sophisticated program called COINTEL, which is counterintelligence. and it was designed to counter our movements at the time, pretty much keep us disunited, because even though those movements were simply fighting for our rights, the COINTEL program had to be against our rights. And so the counterintelligence program, which actually wanted to assassinate and get rid of even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was the guy that is the more peaceful, hey, let's all unite type. So the fact that they thought he was a threat, I truly think that intelligence program just didn't want us to rise. They didn't want us to succeed at all. And then I also think that program, which is, they have this phrase, prevent the rise of the Black Messiah. Yeah, that's a strange phrase, but I think that program had many ideas as to why they wanted to counter us. And they felt like it was countering Black extremism. It's not just the Malcolm X and the Black Panthers they were countering, which I guess, from their angle, if you want to see it as extremism, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who is not on the side of politics as the Black Panthers or Malcolm X would be. And so that's what makes me think any kind of unity for them is a threat. And I still think the conspiracy is alive, because the algorithm of Instagram is very difficult. If I type in the word family, #family, I could get 1 million results and I'll only find their families. To make my database is really difficult, because it's not like I can just use general words. Even if you use general words like family, they're the face of it. General words like beauty, they're the face of it. And that's why we had to put our name next to it. That's why we have to say Black family. But you know what's sad? Even if you type in #Black love on Instagram, you're going to get people that are wearing the color black and then they say they love it, but it's not our race. So I believe they try to do things like that to keep us frenzied, frazzled, and displaced so that we can't unite. I do think they do manipulative things, whether it's through algorithm, through the lack of families they promote in media. There has to be a reason why we are mainly in reality shows, and that form of reality that we get to be in is fighting and brutality. There has to be a reason we don't get to see ourselves in love in media. And this is 2024, and it's like, how come there's not a lot of like us in love or united as a race? Because it's that same concept. I actually think the sexual revolution was a part of the conspiracy against us.
Why I believe the sexual revolution was a conspiracy against our unity, families, and our collective.
My belief is that the sexual revolution was one of the conspiracies, even though it played out as if it was a worldwide event. I always think that when we follow different movements, it tends to hurt us more. And the reason this is my theory that the sexual revolution played a role in our demise is because I'm comparing the information from, for example, this article, which is entitled Historical Marriage Trends from 1890 to 2010, a focus on race differences. And when I go to page 16 of this 27-page research paper, it says, Black men were less often never married compared with white men until 1960, whereas Black women were less likely to be never married than white women up until 1970. And when I type in, when was the sexual revolution, it was in the 1960s and 70s. So I believe that during that time, we bought into that movement, and it decimated us. It did not have the same results as everyone else because eventually other groups went back to the nuclear family element, but we never came back from that. Likewise, I believe that us being sexualized in media is also a conspiracy against us. I think the sexual revolution was actually against the nuclear family, because one of the values they had was we need to disband the nuclear family. But it's not just the sexual revolution, and I've made a video about Black Lives Matter. They too want to get rid of the nuclear family. So why are these organizations, and whoever is funding these organizations into existence, why are they trying to get rid of the nuclear family? Why are they trying to suppress us? And we were the only race that after the sexual revolution, we never came back from that. Yes, I also believe it was other tactics that they used to eliminate the nuclear family. It doesn't have to just be one thing. But the reason I talked about the sexual revolution is because it brought about different imagery in media, different ideals that were perpetuated, and we just never recovered from that point. Prior to that point, people were pro-marriage, pro the nuclear family. So I do think that the powers that be use different ways to destroy the family, different movements that they fund, different organizations and programs that they do to keep us from having families. That conspiracy theory is a well-oiled machine that is inclusive of media, but not limited to. And when we say media, not just media in broadcast, but media in the online media. And that's my belief. And the reason I believe they're doing this is because, just like the phrase preventing the rise of the Black Messiah, they want to prevent the rise of the Black race. Not a Messiah, but a race. Because even if you had a quote Black Messiah, that's still a person that can elevate the people. So they're not concerned of that one person. They're concerned of the influence that person could have over the people. So that Messiah figure, he can influence these people to think differently. And we don't want them to think in a way that where they love themselves, in a way where they actually value themselves. We want them to be frenzied, frazzled, confused, and at war with themselves. I don't think they want to close the wealth gap. I don't think they like people talking like this. But I think the conspiracy goes really deep. And it amazes me. Anything from the lack of funding for HBCUs to lack of showing us in any idealized way. I think there's ways that they try to perpetuate the norm. I don't want to see the Black family be destroyed, the nuclear families be dismantled. I want to see us get married and have high marriage rates. But there's just so many forces that want to prevent that. So knowing that those forces exist makes me think that marriage is a miracle for us. It is an assignment. And just like in Jeremiah 29, verse 6, how the Israelites in Jeremiah were under captivity, after they were freed from captivity, God said, okay, take wives for your sons, take husbands for your daughters, make families, and then teach them to do the same. I think that's what we should do. We were in captivity 400 years as a demographic. If you're a system that's a permanent underclass, because by 2050, we are set to be a permanent underclass. So I think we're still in captivity, even after enslavement was abolished in some places. In other places, for us, enslavement still exists, believe it or not. And so I'd say we're in captivity. We should follow what God said, Jeremiah 29 this. Let's do what he said. Let's get the favor of God. And then that makes me think, that maybe this is also their spiritual things being released when you get married. So if we take from Jeremiah 29 and we apply that to us, what are the ways we can get stronger in the spirit realm? Stronger against these forces that are full throttle against us? Because if they know, oh, if we destroy the black race, like through this mechanism, this conspiracy, this conspiracy, this conspiracy, and we have multiple conspiracies against us, like, we can weaken them. So how can we counter that? By making ourselves stronger, and that's where marriage and the family comes in. Chapter 3, Family Continuum. I talk about what I think the number of families should be within our collective. So let me show you this video. For context, this video footage from the Elevation Church features families dedicating their babies to God. And just look at the procession of families. And I've seen other footage of this specific church. It appears to me that that church is full and there's so much life teeming within it. Okay. So, what does that video make me think? The difference between still waters and constant flow. If I were to say, let me take a cup, dip it into a pond, and just drink it, because the waters are not constantly flowing, that natural filtration doesn't exist there, and that's actually more dangerous and more polluted. But if I were to take a cup and just dip it into a river that's just constantly flowing, it's safer in comparison to the still waters. So when I see a church where it's constantly flowing, there's constant movement through stages, logical progression of families, I think of it as compared to still waters, where there's places where it's a desolation of access. You don't find enough of the opposite sex. Maybe there's not enough males in that church. So it's like, how can they keep their population growing for that specific body of people? And so when we see spots where there are desolation, in other words, there's no real growth of population, it's just stagnant, like, let's assume the worst there, because where are the families? Where are, like, how are we progressing? How can we even see God in that place when it's just, it's his blueprint for us as humans is not being realized in that place?
Family continuum. Defining fertility.
My definition of fertility is not the same as how the world genders it. So the world sees fertility as purely a woman's issue. I see fertility as how much life is in a population. If a population is just women, I don't see it as fertility. Even though women can give birth and they're typically typified as fertile, I see fertility as, is there men and women and families within the population? What is the propensity of this population to be married? Because I don't think it's fertile to just have kids out of wedlock or just out of context. I think of that as chaos. But when I think of fertility, I think of order. I think of structure. I think of balance between the sexes. Fertility equals life. Chaos equals death. So it has to have a life affirming, men and women getting along, children that are happy and adorable and just righteous families. That's what a continuum of families are. Both the biological sexes matter as it pertains to fertility. So I can't just see fertility as women and pregnancy. I see fertility as life and life affirming activity, life and life incentivized activity, life and life making you want to produce more life because you're receiving the fullness of life rather than life having 0 point. So it's like, what's the point of just simply existing? So I can't apply fertility to just birth. I apply fertility to the nurturing environments that make us want to give birth. I apply fertility to something that makes us want to enjoy life and to be alive. And so with the video that I showed of all those families, I see it as an extremely fertile people because there's a constant circulation of people. Life has to keep moving. It can't just stop at a certain generation or population. There has to be more of us. And I honestly think God wouldn't mind if we just kept the marriage rates growing and the family rates growing. Because if the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he comes in like a flood to do that, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to create this concept where we could be drowned out, where we could be killed off. So I don't see it as it's the devil's doing. People are getting married and they're creating families. I think God is highly glorified in high marriage rates, in high family rates. In communities where they have lower rates of families, there's more violence and crime and chaos. So how is God being glorified in that, which is a hell zone, when it has more of the wickedness? So we could just see, the Bible says you can know a tree by its fruit. Let's see by the fruit of low marriage rates, the fruit of low family rates, how that's creating chaos. I have an observation, and that is the more married a population, the better their self-esteem, the better their mental health, the better resources they can output as in human resources. So the more marriageable they are, because they're not just marriageable because they're getting married. The marriage produces the quality that they aspire to. So in order to incentivize marriage and to make people marriageable, the quality of them seeing marriage, accessing marriage, being raised for marriage, normalizing marriage can do that. It's hard to socialize people for marriage if they've never seen it, if they don't have a standard for it.
A family continuum is never supposed to end.
To check out this footage. For context, in this footage, all the women you see in this procession, and I counted at least 7, they are the siblings of a man who's getting married. And as you can see, each of them has their own husbands. And look at all those marriages. The more marriages in a family, the more I'm like, wow, the favor of God is in that family. And I want it to be that if we have siblings, they get married, and we have a high likelihood of getting married as much as our siblings. And not just one sibling per family, like, or if that in some cases. That is a blessing. That family is blessed. That's a fruitful family. That's a massive family because everybody's getting married.
We have many singles in our demographic, but where are the family?
So the problem isn't that there are not enough singles. The problem is that there are too many singles. If we did not have enough singles, that's an actual extreme problem. I don't know how we would be able to supply that need. But if there are all these singles, hello, supply, demand, access, resources, so the family continuum bears that in mind. Like, okay, there are available people to make families with. Chapter 4, Database Nuclear Families. In this section, I share the count of nuclear families within my database. I began my database November 18th, 2021, and had 5 nuclear families. I did a first count on January 3rd, 2022, and found 148 families. A second count conducted on March 24th, 2022, with 423 families. A third count on December 29th, 2022, with 961 families. And my most recent count on August 2nd, 2023, 1,320 families. I want to make these disclaimers of the families counted. It is not my rule or preference to repeat families, so I try really hard not to have families repeated. I counted at least 1 repeat, so give or take the number, 1,320. However, for the most part, that number reflects the majority of families presented. The second disclaimer is I have not counted since August of 2023, so I don't know what the modern number of families within the database would reflect. What is 1,320 nuclear families? That's 1,320 different households of people who all decided to do the same thing. They all decided to nuclear their home. They all decided to marry their family structure. They have different amounts of children. They have different times that they procreate and grow their families. So every household has their own family planning structure, and every household has their own different rules. And so I just think it's amazing how all these people are implementing family, but that they have their reasons. You know, maybe for some of us it's, well, that's just what we do in this specific culture, this specific family, this specific mentality, blah blah blah, right? But I thank God for those who maybe they are the first generation in their bloodline to get married, and they become that representation for the generation to come. I thank God that there are people who made the choice to make family, because through that choice, I don't get to just compile these beautiful photos in a personal project, but through that choice, they're benefiting their lineages, which is all the individual offspring they have. And that could be their great, 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 and so on and so forth, just through their choice. So remember, your choice is consequential. Your choice is meaningful. Your choice is powerful. And when you make that choice in marriage, as a man, you get to be the governor of that household with your wife. And when you make that choice as a woman, you adults, you're not only making a very professional choice, because it's very professional to regulate ourselves and order ourselves in a covenant form, to regulate ourselves in a family structure, and it requires the utmost professionalism. Not only are you making that choice as an adult, but you're making that choice that shows you're a commendable adult. As adults, we need to pattern the behaviors for the next generation. We need morals, we need decency, and we are showing that we can raise the next generation effectively. So I'm honored by those 1,320 families and the others that I've posted that I didn't put to that number, but just comprehensively that amount of people getting married. Wow, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. That compilation of lives, wow. And especially, you have to understand, and especially within our collective, which is typified by chaos, where there is no real cultural push for us to be married in certain environments, and then also where there is so much external and internal whirlwind of dysfunction. That's impressive. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Gershly Karen Pierre, and I'm pro-marriage, pro the nuclear family. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully your New Year's will prosper.